Hi, my name's Mark Middleberg, and I'd like to talk to you about leadership for a highly evangelistic church, or as I call it, a contagious church, a church that's infectious with the gospel. And I want to start with the foundation, something we all know, but it's important to kind of state it and build upon it. And that is, first of all, we're not going to have an effective outreach-oriented church that really reaches people unless we truly build it on the gospel. Romans 1:16 says that the gospel is the power of God unto salvation to everyone who believes. So let's just stick with the basics, right? Also in John 16:8, Jesus said that it's the Holy Spirit that goes out all over the world convicting people of sin and judgment and drawing people to Christ. So we've got to build on the true gospel, the cross of Christ, the message of redemption, and on the Holy Spirit and His work in people's lives. But in addition to that, there's things that we need to do and things we can do that I think as leaders, as we plant churches, as we build churches, as we try to expand the reach of our churches. And what I'd like to do is share with you what I call a 6-stage process that I've developed over decades of doing evangelism and working with churches and church leaders all around the world. And I want to put a caveat in here. This is not 6 easy steps. This is not like a recipe. Here's the bowl. Just put in these 6, stir. It's going to be simple. This is hard stuff. I think the Holy Spirit will bless it. I think the Spirit will use it to magnify the gospel. But it's a process that I think will really work, and I believe it's biblical, and I believe it's transferable. And you see if you agree as I go through this. So here it is. The first stage in this 6-stage process begins with me, begins with you. And that is, as leaders, we must own and model evangelistic values. In other words, you're not going to have an evangelistic church if you're not an evangelistic leader. It just is not going to happen. You set the pace. Jesus said, when the student is fully trained, he'll be just like you, the teacher, the leader. And so if we want to grow our churches in terms of evangelism, if we want to plant evangelistic churches, the best place and really the essential first place to start is in our own lives, saying, I'm going to do what it takes to reach out to people around me. I'm going to stretch. And by the way, you don't have to be good at it. I know a lot of you are saying, well, this is not my gift. This is not my main area. I'm more of a teacher or a shepherd, or that's fine. But we are all members of the church to which Christ gave the Great Commission. And if we want to build highly evangelistic churches, we as leaders have to grow in this area first. And I kind of like the way Lee Strobel says this. He says, you know what? As leaders, we will set the high water mark for evangelism in our churches. And I know that's sobering news. It's like, man, so I'm like a limiter. But here's the good news. As you grow, your church can grow with you. So it begins with us. We must own and model evangelistic values. So that leads us to stage 2, which is that as we are living these values, as we are taking risks for the sake of the gospel in our own life, in our own relationships, then stage 2 says we need to instill those values in the people around us. And at that point we can say, don't just do as I say, do as I do. And how do we instill that? Well, when you're leading, lead it. And insist to the people that you're building this church with that, we're supposed to be here to reach people for Christ. That's going to be the central value here. We're going to make that a priority. We're going to take risks, as I said a minute ago, risks for the sake of the gospel. So if you're a leader, you lead it. When you teach it. And so I would regularly be teaching, sermon series or giving talks or illustrating in other talks with the value of evangelism, with stories of neighbors I'm talking to and, people in our church that are making efforts and, events that we're doing, just highlighting the value of reaching lost people for Christ. So 1 was own and model, 2 is instill. Number 3 is make or break, and that is we need to empower an evangelistic point person. And friends, I believe every church needs someone, a sharp leader who's focused on evangelism, who becomes a partner and really a peer and partner to the pastor. Someone, I mean, I'm not talking about reaching out for some religious, evangelistic fanatic in our church that we don't know what to do with, so let's put them in charge of it. That'll kill your evangelism. You want a sharp leader who knows how to get things done, but who cares about people far from God. And then you empower that person. And once you've prayerfully sought out the right person, then you bring that person up on the stage. You say, this is my partner for reaching our community for Christ. This person is going to be a trainer and a coach for all of us. So, when you need help, when you need information, you turn to this person, and their number is in the bulletin, and you can reach them. They will help you. And by the way, I know some of you are probably thinking, well, that's good for a big church, right? But we're just planting a church. We've got a smaller church. We can't afford to have someone focused just on evangelism. And my response to that is, if you're a smaller church, you can't afford not to have someone focused on reaching people for Christ. I mean, how are you going to grow? You need someone focused on it. And I like what Rick Warren said. His book, The Purpose-Driven Church. He said, even if I was just planting a church and I had 5 people on my team, I would put one of them in charge of reaching lost people in our community and let them focus on that. And then as they're effective, it'll grow, and eventually they'll become, a staff member just leading this area. But I couldn't agree more. Regardless of the size, even if you're just beginning to plant, have someone, that you prayerfully seek out and empower to lead the outreach of the church. Now let me more quickly talk about stages 4, 5, and 6, because they flow right out of stage 3. Once you have that point person, that person's job becomes stage 4, which is training everyone in the church to share their faith in natural ways. And when I say everyone, I really mean that. We are all members of the church to which Christ gave the Great Commission. And so we need to instill this vision to say, don't miss the action. Don't be on the sideline. You need to be trained and equipped. And again, we have this point leader who's going to do seminars and classes and going to teach you how to naturally share your faith. And so, look to that person and really empower that person, then train all your people. Stage 5 then is that person, again, the point person, leads teams and begins to organize people who want to go further with outreach. And then finally, stage 6 is that we unleash a variety of outreach ministries and events, all kinds of things, evangelistic small groups, seminars, band, like concerts and events, all kinds of things that we can invite people into to magnify our outreach as a church. So I just want to urge you, really consider, prayerfully instill this 6-stage process. If you want to learn more about it, I've written about it in my book, Contagious Church, but I've seen this work all over the place, and I want to end with a challenge. Don't view this as like an incremental dial tweak. We are facing challenges in the church and in the world to reach people for Christ. The numbers in many places are not going the right way. And I'm telling you, we got to get radical about this. We've got to raise our vision, raise our commitment, raise our investment in this area, empower people, train people, unleash people. And I believe as we do this and as we preach the biblical gospel under the power of the Holy Spirit, He's going to use us and we'll be contagious throughout our community, throughout our nation, all around the world. God bless.